Admiral Vexteron of the Hegemony's Third Expansion Fleet had served the Empire for 347 cycles. In that time, he had witnessed the subjugation of 12 species, the glassing of 4 worlds, and the systematic dismantling of every civilization foolish enough to resist hegemony expansion. His 4 eyes, arranged in the traditional diamond pattern of the Korvathi species, had seen empires fall and stars die. Nothing had prepared him for what appeared on his tactical display that morning. "Admiral," his sensor officer called out, her voice carrying an unusual tremor. "We're detecting an anomalous contact bearing 37 Mark 215, distance 40,000 kelix." Vexteron's secondary eyes remained fixed on the star map before him, while his primary pair shifted to the young officer. Lieutenant Yira was competent, perhaps too competent for her own comfort. She had a tendency to find things others missed, and those discoveries rarely brought good news. "Define anomalous, Lieutenant." I'm not certain, Admiral. The signature doesn't match anything in our database. I've run it through 3 separate classification protocols. Each time, the system returns an error code I've never seen before. That got his attention. The Hegemony's database contained information on every known species, every ship design, every engine signature cataloged across 14,000 years of expansion. The idea that something could exist beyond that repository of knowledge was, by all conventional understanding, impossible. "Put it on the main display." The holographic projector at the center of the bridge flickered to life, and a 3-dimensional representation of the contact materialized in soft blue light. Vexteron felt his blood run cold. The vessel was unlike anything he had ever seen. Where hegemony ships favored smooth, organic curves that spoke to the aesthetic sensibilities of the founding species, this craft was all hard angles and brutal functionality. Its hull was a patchwork of what appeared to be different materials. Some sections gleamed with polished metal, others were scorched and scarred, and still more seemed to be covered in a substance that defied classification. Along its flanks, symbols were painted in a red so dark it was nearly black, characters in a language no Korvathi had ever encountered. Most disturbing of all was its size. The tactical computer estimated the vessel's length at just under 2 kelix, roughly 3/4 the size of his own flagship, the Eternal Dominion. A ship that size should have a crew of thousands, should be surrounded by escort vessels, should be part of a fleet. This one was utterly alone. "Have they detected us?" Vexteron asked. "Unknown, Admiral. Their sensor emissions are irregular. I'm reading energy patterns that shouldn't be possible. Some kind of active scanning system, but it's operating on frequencies we don't use. I can't tell if they've seen us or not." "Communications. Hail them on all standard frequencies." The communications officer, an elderly Korvathi named Trevmore, who had served under 3 different admirals, worked his console with practiced efficiency. "Broadcasting standard first contact protocols, Admiral. All frequencies, all languages in our database." They waited. On the tactical display, the unknown vessel continued on its heading, neither accelerating nor changing course. It moved through the void with a kind of patient inevitability that made Vexteron deeply uncomfortable. "No response, Admiral." "Continue broadcasting. Widen the spectrum. Include visual representations, mathematical sequences, anything that might establish basic communication." "Already done, sir. I've exhausted our standard protocols. Either they can't understand us, or they're choosing not to respond." Vexteron rose from his command chair and approached the holographic display. His reflection shimmered in the vessel's rendered hull, and for a moment he had the irrational feeling that something was watching him back. Navigation. What's their projected course? If they maintain current heading and velocity, they'll pass through the Karath system in approximately 6 standard hours. That puts them directly in the path of Battle Group 7. Battle Group 7. 27 vessels under the command of Commodore Wrath, including the dreadnought Wrath of Conquest and its supporting fleet. More than enough firepower to reduce a planet to slag. Send a priority message to Commodore Wrath. Inform him of the unknown contact. Tell him to maintain position and observe, but not to engage unless fired upon. I want to know what we're dealing with before we make any aggressive moves.
Understood, Admiral.
As the bridge crew carried out their duties, Vexterin remained standing before the holographic display, watching the unknown vessel crawl across the tactical map. In 3 centuries of service, he had learned to trust his instincts. Those instincts were screaming at him now, telling him that something terrible was about to happen. He just didn't know what. 6 hours later, the terrible thing happened. Commodore Wrath was not known for his patience. The Korvathi officer had earned his rank through a combination of political maneuvering and brutal efficiency. He had crushed 3 rebellions during his career, each one with a ruthlessness that had earned him the admiration of his superiors and the terror of his enemies. He viewed the galaxy through the lens of predator and prey, and he had long ago determined which category he occupied. When Admiral Vexterin's message reached him, informing him of an unknown vessel on approach, his first reaction was irritation. Unknown vessels were not supposed to exist. The hegemony had spent millennia ensuring that they knew everything worth knowing about the galaxy. The idea that something had escaped their notice was, to Wrath's mind, an insult. His second reaction was opportunism. If this was truly a first contact situation, then whoever successfully established communication, or dominance, over the newcomers would reap considerable political rewards. Battle Group 7 was the closest force to the contact. That meant the glory would be his. All vessels, assume formation Alpha 7, Wrath commanded from the bridge of the Wrath of Conquest. Weapon systems to standby. I want full sensor coverage of that vessel the moment it enters effective range. Around him, the 26 other ships of his battle group moved into position. Heavy cruisers formed the outer ring, their weapons batteries trained on the approaching contact. Destroyers and frigates filled the gaps, ready to swarm any target that presented itself. And at the center of it all, the Wrath of Conquest loomed like a predator waiting to strike. 2.5 kelix of armor, weapons, and malevolent intent. Contact, entering sensor range now, Commodore. The tactical display flickered as new data flooded in. Wrath leaned forward, studying the unknown vessel with the intensity of a hunter examining its prey. Up close, the ship was even stranger than the long-range scans had suggested. Its hull was covered in what appeared to be battle damage, old battle damage, wounds that had been patched and repaired countless times. Entire sections looked like they had been replaced with salvaged materials, creating a patchwork appearance that should have rendered the vessel structurally unsound. And yet, somehow, it held together. The symbols along its flanks were clearer now, though no less mysterious. Red characters on a white background, repeated at regular intervals. Some kind of designation, perhaps, or a warning. Still no response to our hails, Commodore. They're maintaining course and velocity. Wrath's eyes narrowed. Passive or aggressive? Neither, sir. They're not targeting us, but they're also not slowing down or attempting to communicate. It's like they don't even notice we're here. That was what finally triggered Wrath's decision. He could tolerate mystery. He could even tolerate potential threat. What he could not tolerate was being ignored. All vessels, arm weapons. Target the unknown contact and prepare to fire on my command." His tactical officer hesitated. "Sir, Admiral Vexteron's orders were—" "Admiral Vexteron is 6 hours away. I am here, and I am in command of this battle group." Hroth's voice carried the cold certainty of a death sentence. "If that vessel will not acknowledge us, we will make our presence known. One warning shot across their bow. If they still refuse to respond, we will assume hostile intent and act accordingly."
Understood, Commodore.
Around the formation, weapons batteries hummed to life. Energy coils charged to full capacity. Missile tubes cycled open, revealing rows of warheads designed to pierce the heaviest armor. 27 ships prepared to deliver a message that could not be misunderstood. Fire warning shot. A single beam of concentrated energy lanced out from the wrath of conquest, cutting through the void at the speed of light. It passed within 500 measures of the unknown vessel's bow, close enough to register on any sensor system, far enough to avoid causing damage. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the unknown vessel stopped. It didn't decelerate. It didn't adjust its heading. One moment it was moving at a steady velocity, and the next it was completely stationary, as if the laws of physics had simply ceased to apply. "What in the name of—" Wrath's tactical officer began, but he never finished the sentence. Because the unknown vessel was turning. Not with the ponderous grace of a capital ship, not with the careful maneuvering of a combat vessel repositioning for battle. It spun on its axis like a predator catching the scent of blood, bringing its bow to bear on the wrath of conquest with a speed that should have torn it apart. And in that moment, Commodore Hroth looked upon the face of his death. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came in the form of a priority transmission from the Vigilant Claw, the outermost ship in Battle Group 7's formation. "All vessels, we are under attack. I repeat, we are under—" The transmission cut off with brutal finality. On the tactical display, the Vigilant Claw's icon flickered once and then vanished. Hroth didn't have time to process the loss before 2 more ships disappeared. The Sworn Oath and the Bitter Victory simply ceased to exist, their icons winking out as if they had never been. There was no explosion, no debris field, nothing that the sensors could identify as the aftermath of a weapon strike. They were just gone. "All vessels, return fire! Target that ship and destroy it!" 24 ships, all that remained of his battle group, opened fire simultaneously. The void between them and the unknown vessel filled with a storm of energy beams, missile tracks, and kinetic projectiles. It was enough firepower to crack a planet's crust, enough destructive potential to end civilizations. The unknown vessel didn't even slow down. It wove through the barrage with impossible grace, its scarred hull twisting and rolling in ways that defied every law of physics Wrath understood. Weapons fire that should have struck home missed by margins so thin they shouldn't have been possible. Missiles that locked onto its signature suddenly lost their targets, spiraling off into the void. Energy beams bent around it as if repelled by an invisible force. And all the while, it was firing back. The weapon systems on the unknown vessel bore no resemblance to anything in the hegemony's arsenal. Some shots appeared to be kinetic projectiles, but they moved far too fast and hit far too hard. Others were energy-based, but their frequency and intensity were beyond any sensor calibration. And then there were the weapons that couldn't be classified at all. Pulses of something that wasn't quite light and wasn't quite matter, that passed through shields like they weren't there and reduced armor to vapor on contact. The relentless fury exploded, its reactor core breached by a single shot that punched through its entire length. The endless conquest split in half, severed by an invisible blade that left both sections drifting apart. The glorious subjugation simply crumpled, its hull collapsing inward as if crushed by an enormous fist. Hroth watched in frozen horror as his battle group was systematically dismantled. 7 ships gone. 10. 14. The survivors tried to retreat, tried to scatter, tried to do anything to escape the nightmare that had descended upon them. But the unknown vessel was everywhere at once, its weapons reaching out with supernatural precision to claim victim after victim. "Commodore!" His communications officer was screaming now, all pretense of discipline abandoned. "Orders! What are your orders?" Hroth tried to speak, but no words came. In his mind, he was already dead. He had been dead from the moment he gave the order to fire that warning shot. Everything since then had simply been the universe catching up to that reality. The unknown vessel appeared directly in front of the Wrath of Conquest, close enough that Hroth could see the individual battle scars on its hull with his naked eyes. Through the forward viewport, he found himself staring at the ship's bow, at the weapons arrays that were cycling to full power, at the red symbols that seemed to glow with an inner fire. For just a moment, he thought he saw something moving behind one of the vessel's observation ports. A silhouette, a shadow. Something looking back at him with eyes that burned with cold fury. Then the weapons fired, and Commodore Hroth's story came to an end. Admiral Vexteran received the news while reviewing supply manifests in his private quarters. The transmission came through on a priority channel, encrypted with codes reserved for the most sensitive communications. When he decoded it and read its contents, the supply manifests fell from his nerveless fingers. Battle Group 7 destroyed. All ships lost. No survivors. 27 ships, over 40,000 crew members, one of the most powerful military formations in the entire sector, reduced to debris in less than 10 standard minutes. And the unknown vessel, according to the final sensor readings transmitted by the Wrath of Conquest before its destruction, had taken no damage whatsoever. Vexteran's first call was to High Command. The Hegemony's High Council convened in emergency session for the first time in over a century. The 12 members of that august body, representatives of the 7 founding species and the 5 most powerful client races, gathered in the great chamber beneath the capital's ancient spires, their faces displaying varying degrees of shock, disbelief, and poorly concealed fear. "This is impossible," declared Counselor Veth, the senior Korvathi representative. No single vessel could destroy an entire battle group. The tactical data must be corrupted. "The tactical data has been verified by 3 separate analyses teams," replied Admiral Vexteran, who had been summoned to provide a direct briefing. "Every sensor reading, every communication log, every fragment of surviving evidence tells the same story. A single vessel of unknown origin engaged Battle Group 7 and achieved complete victory without sustaining any detectable damage." Then the Commodore was incompetent. He must have made some critical error in judgment. Commodore Hroth was many things, but he was not incompetent. Moreover, tactical simulations suggest that the outcome would have been identical regardless of the battle group's formation or tactics. The enemy vessel demonstrated capabilities that exceed our current understanding of physics. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The counselors exchanged uneasy glances, each of them grappling with the implications of what they were hearing. Finally, Counselor Yethara of the Ven Dominion spoke. Her species was known for their analytical minds and their tendency to seek rational explanations for irrational phenomena. Let us set aside the tactical concerns for a moment and focus on the fundamental question. Who are these beings? Where did they come from? And why have we never encountered them before? Vexteron activated the holographic display in the center of the chamber. The unknown vessel materialized in ghostly blue light, rotating slowly so that every counselor could examine its form. We have conducted an exhaustive search of our database. Every known species, every recorded encounter, every rumor and legend dating back to the founding of the hegemony, nothing matches this vessel or the technology it demonstrated. That is not possible, Counselor Veth insisted. We have catalogued every star system within 30,000 light-years. We have subjugated or absorbed every civilization we have encountered. There is nowhere in this galaxy where an advanced species could have developed undetected. And yet, Yathara said quietly, the evidence suggests otherwise. There is one other possibility we must consider, said a new voice. All eyes turned to the speaker. High Counselor Carthex, eldest and most senior member of the council, rarely spoke during sessions. When he did, others listened. Throughout our history, we have encountered species at various levels of development. Primitives huddling in caves. Early spacefaring civilizations taking their first tentative steps beyond their homeworlds. And, occasionally, older races that had achieved technological sophistication. But in every case, we have been able to incorporate them into our database, to understand their capabilities, to find their weaknesses and exploit them. He paused, his ancient eyes fixed on the holographic vessel. What if this species represents something different? What if they have remained hidden not through geography, but through intent? What if they have been watching us, studying us, waiting for something? Waiting for what? Counselor Veth demanded. That, said High Counselor Carthex, is what we must determine, before they decide to demonstrate their capabilities on a larger scale. The search for answers consumed the hegemony's intelligence apparatus for the next 30 cycles. Thousands of analysts reviewed centuries of data, looking for any hint of the unknown species. Ships were dispatched to the location of Battle Group 7's destruction, hoping to recover debris or sensor readings that might provide additional clues. What they found only deepened the mystery. The unknown vessel had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Sensor sweeps of the area revealed nothing but the shattered remains of the hegemony ships, drifting through the void like the bones of some great beast. Of the craft that had destroyed them, there was no trace. No drive signatures, no residual energy readings, nothing to indicate which direction it had gone. Meanwhile, the analysts' search of the database yielded a discovery that was, in its own way, even more troubling than the attack itself. "We found something," the lead analyst reported to Admiral Vexteran. "Not in the primary database, but in the archives. Records so old they were nearly corrupted beyond retrieval." "Show me." The analyst activated her display. A star map appeared, ancient and faded, showing a region of space on the far edge of known territory. One star system was highlighted in red, marked with symbols that predated the current Korvathi language. "This is from the early expansion period, over 12,000 years ago. A survey vessel encountered something in this system, something that frightened them so badly they refused to return." "What did they find?" "The records are fragmentary, but the vessel's commander left a personal log. It describes, I think it's best if you hear it yourself." She activated an audio recording. After a moment of static, a voice emerged. The recording quality was poor, but the words were clear.
encountered a vessel of unknown design. We attempted first contact protocols, but they did not respond. When we approached for a closer scan, it was like nothing I have ever seen. They simply looked at us. That's the only way I can describe it. Their ship turned toward us, and it felt like something was looking into my soul, reading every thought I had ever had, judging me and finding me wanting. We fled. We fled, and we did not look back.
Let this serve as a warning to any who come after. There are things in this galaxy that should not be disturbed. There are things that sleep, and we must pray they do not wake. The recording ended. Admiral Vextorin stared at the display for a long moment. This system, has it been surveyed since this recording was made? No, sir. The system was flagged as hazardous and excluded from all exploration protocols. Over the millennia, the records were archived and largely forgotten. Until now. What is the system's designation? The analyst consulted her notes. At the time of the original survey, it was classified as Sol 3 by its coordinates. But the commander added a personal notation to his log. He called it the sleeping place. Sol 3, Vectorin repeated, tasting the unfamiliar sounds. And the species the commander encountered? What did his records call them? The analyst's face was pale. The translation is imprecise, sir, but as near as I can determine, the original term meant something like the ones who remember, or possibly the ones who never forget. And in your assessment, is this the same species that destroyed Battle Group 7? I cannot say for certain, sir, but the technical descriptions in the ancient log, the weapon signatures, the maneuverability, the ability to simply appear and disappear at will, they match what we observed during the attack. If this is the same species, then they have been out there for 12,000 years, watching, waiting. Waiting for what? The analyst met his eyes. For us to give them a reason to stop waiting. 300 cycles passed. The hegemony did not forget the destruction of Battle Group 7, but as time wore on without further incident, the urgency of the threat began to fade. Other matters demanded attention: rebellions to crush, resources to exploit, empires to expand. The unknown vessel became a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the mighty hegemony had limits to its knowledge. But there were those who did not forget, who could not forget. Admiral Vextorin, now promoted to Fleet Admiral in recognition of his handling of the crisis, spent those 300 cycles preparing for the day when the unknown species would return. He studied the ancient records obsessively, searching for any additional information about the Sol 3 system and its inhabitants. He commissioned new sensor technologies designed to detect the unique signatures of the unknown vessel. He trained his crews in unconventional tactics, teaching them to adapt and improvise in ways that traditional hegemony doctrine would never have allowed. And he waited. The waiting ended on the 407th day of his 301st cycle of service. Fleet Admiral, we have a contact. Vextoron was on the bridge of his new flagship, the Absolute Authority, within minutes of the report. The massive vessel was the most advanced ship in the hegemony's arsenal, equipped with every technological advantage that centuries of development could provide. None of that gave him confidence as he looked at the tactical display. "Same signature as before?" he asked. "Identical, sir. Single vessel, unknown design, operating on unconventional frequencies. It appeared approximately 3 hours ago at the edge of the Corinth system." The Corinth system, one of the hegemony's most important industrial centers, home to billions of citizens and orbital facilities that produced the significant percentage of the fleet's vessels. If the unknown ship attacked there, the consequences would be catastrophic.
Current status?
Stationary, sir. It has not moved since its initial appearance. It's just sitting there. Vectoran studied the display. The vessel looked exactly as it had 300 cycles ago. The same patchwork hull, the same scarred armor, the same red symbols along its flanks. If it had been damaged in the battle with Battle Group 7, there was no sign of it now.
Any attempt at communication?
Negative, sir. Silent on all frequencies. Then we will try a different approach. Prepare a diplomatic shuttle. I'm going to meet them personally.
His bridge crew stared at him in shock. Sir, you can't be serious. After what happened to Battle Group 7?
I am completely serious. Commodore Hrath's mistake was treating these beings as enemies before he understood who they were. I do not intend to repeat that error.
But, sir, the risk is mine to take. Vextoran's voice carried the authority of centuries. If I am killed, you are to retreat immediately and report to High Command. Under no circumstances are you to engage the unknown vessel. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Good. Prepare the shuttle. The journey from the absolute authority to the unknown vessel took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of silence, broken only by the hum of the shuttle's engines and the steady rhythm of Vextoran's own breathing. As he approached, the unknown vessel loomed larger and larger in his viewport. Up close, the battle damage on its hull was even more apparent. Thousands of individual scars, some recent and others ancient beyond reckoning. This ship had fought countless battles over what must have been an inconceivably long period of time. And yet it was still here, still functioning, still waiting. His shuttle's communications array activated without warning. A voice emerged from the speakers, deep, resonant, and speaking in perfect Korvathi. You are not like the others. Vextoran's hearts skipped a beat. In 300 cycles, this was the first time the unknown species had communicated with anyone. I am Fleet Admiral Vextoran of the Hegemony. I come in peace, seeking understanding. Peace. The voice seemed to taste the word. An interesting concept, coming from a representative of the hegemony. Your people have not been known for their peaceful intentions. I will not defend the actions of my government. I can only speak for myself. I do not wish for further conflict between our peoples. I only wish to understand who you are and what you want. A long pause. Then, dock with us, Fleet Admiral. We will speak face to face. A docking port materialized on the unknown vessel's hull. Materialized was the only word for it, as if the metal had simply flowed aside to create an opening. Vectoran guided his shuttle toward it, his hand steady despite the terror in his hearts. The interior of the unknown vessel was as strange as its exterior. The corridors were lit by a soft, warm glow that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air was breathable, though it carried unfamiliar scents that Vextoran's senses could not classify. And everywhere he looked, he saw more evidence of the ship's long history. Patches and repairs, modifications and additions, layers upon layers of change accumulated over what must have been millions of cycles. A figure emerged from the shadows ahead of him. It was bipedal, roughly Vextoran's height, with 2 arms and a head positioned at the top of a straight torso. Its skin was a pale pinkish color, covered by fabric garments of simple design. Its face was flat,
with 2 forward-facing eyes, a small protuberance in the center, and a horizontal opening below that appeared to be a mouth. By any objective standard, it was an utterly unremarkable creature. There was nothing about its physical form that suggested the terrible power its ship had demonstrated. And yet, when it looked at Vexteron, he felt the same sensation that the ancient commander had described 12,000 years ago. The sensation of being seen, of being known, of being judged. "Welcome aboard the Remembrance," the creature said. Its mouth moved in sync with the words, though Vectoran suspected some form of translation technology was at work. "I am Captain Sarah Chen. I've been expecting you." "Expecting me?" "You're different from the others. When we first encountered your hegemony, centuries ago, we saw nothing but aggression and conquest. We chose to remain hidden, to observe, to wait. When your battle group fired on us, we responded as we always have when threatened, with overwhelming force. You killed 40,000 of my people." Yes, there was no apology in the word, no regret, only acknowledgement. We have killed many more than that over the ages. Species that attacked us, civilizations that tried to enslave us, empires that sought to exterminate us. We have survived because we remember, because we never forget those who would do us harm. And the hegemony? Do you count us among those who would do you harm? Captain Chen studied him with those strange, flat eyes. That is what we are trying to determine. You came here alone, unarmed, seeking dialogue rather than destruction. That is not what we expected. I have spent 3 centuries preparing for this moment. I have studied every fragment of data about your people that I could find. I know that you encountered us long before we encountered you. I know that you chose to remain hidden. I know that your technology far exceeds our own. And I know that if you wanted to destroy the hegemony, you could have done so at any time during those 12,000 years. All true. So I must ask, why haven't you? For the first time, something shifted in Captain Chen's expression. Vexteron's limited understanding of this species' body language could not interpret it fully, but he thought it might be sadness? Because we remember something else, Fleet Admiral, something that your species has apparently forgotten. What is that? That violence, while sometimes necessary, is never desirable. That war is a failure of civilization, not a measure of its success. That every life we take diminishes us, even when we have no choice but to take it. She turned and began walking down the corridor, gesturing for him to follow. "Let me show you something." The chamber she led him to was vast, far larger than the ship's external dimensions should have allowed. Its walls were covered in images, photographs, paintings, digital displays, and forms of visual media that Vectoran could not identify. Millions of images, stretching from floor to ceiling and extending into the distance further than his eyes could see. "This is the Hall of Memory," Captain Chen said. "Every face you see here represents someone we have lost. Not killed, lost. People who died defending what we believe in, or who sacrificed themselves so that others might live, or who simply fell victim to the endless cruelties of an indifferent universe." Vextoran studied the nearest images. Each one showed a creature similar to Captain Chen, the same basic body plan, with variations in coloring, size, and facial structure. Young faces and old, males and females, some smiling, some serious,
some caught in moments of unguarded emotion.
How many?
Billions. Over the course of our history, we have lost billions of our people to war, disease, natural disasters, and simple misfortune. Every single one of them is remembered here. Every single one of them has a name, a story, a legacy.
Why show me this?
Because this is why we do not conquer. This is why we do not subjugate. We have learned, through millennia of bitter experience, that the costs of empire are always paid in blood. Blood of those we conquer and blood of our own people. We have fought countless wars. We have emerged victorious from every one. And we have built this monument to remind ourselves of what those victories cost.
She stopped before a section of the wall that showed a series of particularly old images. The technology used to capture them was clearly primitive, and the faces it showed were marked by a rawness and intensity that the more recent images lacked.
These are the oldest records we have. They date back to a period in our history that we call the Great Dying. Our species nearly destroyed itself, Fleet Admiral. We came within a generation of extinction, not because of any external threat, but because we could not stop fighting among ourselves.
What saved you? Many things. But perhaps most importantly, we learned to remember, to never forget the lessons we had paid for in blood. We built ships like this one, not as weapons of conquest, but as monuments to our own capacity for destruction. Every scar on our hull represents a battle we did not want to fight but could not avoid. Every patch represents lives we took in defense of our own.
She turned to face him, and in her eyes, Vexteron saw something that transcended species, something that spoke to the fundamental nature of sapient existence.
We call ourselves humans, Fleet Admiral, and we have watched your hegemony for a very long time. We have seen you conquer and subjugate. We have seen you destroy civilizations that might have been allies if you had approached them differently. We have seen you repeat every mistake we made during our darkest days.
And you did not intervene? You did not try to stop us?
It was not our place. Every species must find its own path. Some find wisdom. Others find only destruction. We hoped for 300 cycles that your hegemony might be capable of learning, that the loss of Battle Group 7 might serve as a catalyst for change. And has it? Captain Chen smiled, a strange expression involving the curving of her mouth, but one that Vexteron somehow understood as a sign of positive emotion. You're here, aren't you? Alone, unarmed, seeking understanding rather than vengeance. That suggests to me that at least some members of your species are capable of growth.
Some, Vexteron acknowledged. Not all, not even most. The High Council will not accept what I have learned here. They will see your power as a threat to be neutralized, not a lesson to be learned.
Yes, we know. We have observed your council for many centuries. Their reaction to our existence is predictable. Then what happens now? If you know they will respond with aggression, why reveal yourselves at all? Because the time for hiding is over. Captain Chen walked to the center of the chamber, where a holographic display flickered to life. It showed a star map, not the limited territory of the hegemony, but the entire galaxy. Billions upon billions of stars rendered in impossible detail.
Your hegemony controls approximately 2% of this galaxy, Fleet Admiral, a significant accomplishment by any measure. But there are forces at work in the larger universe that make your expansion irrelevant. Forces that do not care about borders or territories or the petty conflicts of individual species.
What forces?
Look! The map zoomed out, then out again, then again, until the galaxy was just one of countless billions spiraling through an infinite void. And in that void, something was moving. Dark shapes, vast beyond comprehension, drifting through the spaces between galaxies like shadows given form. We call them the Devouring. They exist on scales that make individual stars meaningless. They consume everything they encounter: matter, energy, information, even time itself. And they are coming this way.
Vectoran felt his blood freeze. How long?
In galactic terms, they are already here. In terms that matter to your species or mine, perhaps 10,000 years, perhaps less.
And you have known about this for how long?
We detected the first signs of their approach roughly 50,000 years ago. We have spent every moment since then preparing.
Preparing? How?
Captain Chen smiled again, but this time there was something fierce in it, something that reminded Vexteran of the battle that had destroyed Battle Group 7. We have been awakening the sleepers. Every species we have ever encountered that showed potential for growth, we have preserved their records, studied their capabilities, waited for the moment when they might be ready to join us. The hegemony is one of several thousand civilizations we have been observing. Some will never be ready. Some have already destroyed themselves. But those that remain,
You want us to fight alongside you.
We want you to evolve, to become something more than conquerors and subjugators, to remember that there is more to existence than dominance and control. And yes, ultimately, we want you to stand with us against a threat that no single species can face alone.
the Council will never agree. Then you will have to convince them, or replace them. The choice is yours, Fleet Admiral. We will not make it for you. But know this: the Devouring does not negotiate. It does not conquer. It simply consumes. When it arrives, there will be no hegemony, no humanity, no individual species at all. There will only be those who stood together, and those who stood alone and fell.
Fleet Admiral Vexteran returned to the Absolute Authority in a state of profound shock. His crew, who had expected him to either die aboard the unknown vessel or return with strategic intelligence they could exploit, did not know how to react when he ordered an immediate return to the capital.
The journey took 3 standard cycles. Vexteran spent most of that time in his private quarters, reviewing the data that Captain Chen had given him. The evidence of the Devouring was comprehensive and terrifying. Sensor readings from the edge of observable space, mathematical projections of the entity's approach, historical records from species that had encountered them and survived long enough to leave warnings before being consumed.
It was, in many ways, the most important intelligence briefing in the history of the hegemony. It was also completely useless without the Council's cooperation.
The High Council convened to hear his report. Vexteran stood before them, feeling the weight of 12,000 years of civilization pressing down upon his shoulders, and began to speak. He told them everything: the encounter with Captain Chen, the history of humanity, the Hall of Memory, the Devouring, the choice that lay before them. When he finished, the council chamber was silent. Then Counselor Veth spoke, and his voice carried the icy certainty that Vextoran had learned to dread. This is clearly a manipulation. The humans have demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. They know we cannot defeat them by force, so they invent a larger threat, one that conveniently requires us to abandon our expansion and submit to their authority. It is the oldest trick in the Book of Conquest. I saw the evidence, Counselor. The data is not fabricated.
You saw what they wanted you to see. They are clearly capable of technological feats far beyond our understanding. Creating false evidence would be trivial for such a species.
And if the evidence is not false, if the devouring is real, then we will deal with it when it arrives. In the meantime, our path is clear. We must find a way to neutralize the human threat. They have revealed themselves after 12,000 years of hiding. That suggests they have a weakness we can exploit. Vexteran looked around the chamber, searching for any sign of support. But the other counselors were nodding along with Veth's words, their expressions hardening into the familiar mask of hegemony's certainty. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "We are protecting our civilization. If you cannot accept that, then perhaps your loyalty is no longer reliable." The threat was unmistakable. Vexteran had served the hegemony for over 3 centuries. He had dedicated his entire life to its expansion and defense. But in that moment, standing before the council that would rather risk extinction than accept help from another species, he felt something fundamental shift within him. "My loyalty," he said, "is to the survival of our people, not to the council, not to the hegemony, to the billions of citizens who depend on us to protect them from threats they cannot imagine." "That is not your decision to make." "No, it is yours, and you are choosing wrong." He turned and walked out of the chamber, ignoring the outcry that erupted behind him. He did not know what would happen next. He did not know if he would be arrested, executed, or simply disappeared. But he knew with absolute certainty that he could no longer be part of what the hegemony was becoming. He was not arrested. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Within cycles of the council session, rumors began to spread. Whispers of the fleet admiral's testimony. Fragments of the data he had presented. The word devouring began appearing in communications across the empire, passed from one citizen to another in an unstoppable wave of information. Someone on the council had leaked his report. Perhaps one of the junior members, shocked by the council's refusal to act. Perhaps an intelligence officer with more loyalty to the truth than to their superiors. Perhaps even a member of the council itself, harboring doubts they could not express publicly. It did not matter who. What mattered was that the truth was spreading. And with the truth came questions. Why had the humans remained hidden for so long? Why had they revealed themselves now? What was the devouring, and why had the council dismissed it without investigation? Were the leaders of the hegemony more concerned with preserving their power than with protecting their citizens? The questions led to protests. The protests led to unrest. The unrest led to something that had not happened in the hegemony for over 2,000 years. Revolution. The revolution was not quick or clean. It never is when an empire built on conquest and subjugation begins to collapse from within. Factions formed, alliances shifted, and for a time it seemed that the hegemony might tear itself apart before the devouring ever arrived. But throughout the chaos, one voice remained consistent. Fleet Admiral Vexteran, stripped of his rank by the council but embraced by the reformist movement, spoke to anyone who would listen. He shared everything he had learned about humanity, about the devouring, about the choice that lay before them. "We can continue as we have always been," he said in a broadcast that reached every corner of the empire. "We can cling to our pride and our traditions and our certainty that we are the masters of all we survey. Or we can accept that we are one species among many, that there are things in this universe greater than ourselves, and that our only hope lies in cooperation rather than conquest. Many rejected his message. The Council loyalists branded him a traitor, a human collaborator, a coward who had been seduced by alien promises. But many more listened, and among those listeners were military officers who had grown tired of endless expansion, administrators who had seen the costs of empire, scientists who had always suspected that the hegemony's understanding of the universe was incomplete. The turning point came when the Remembrance appeared in orbit over the hegemony's capital world.
There was no aggression this time, no warning shots, no destruction. The human vessel simply materialized in a stable orbit, broadcasting a single message on all frequencies.
We are here to help. We ask only that you listen.
The Council ordered the orbital defense platforms to open fire. Half of them refused. Within cycles, the loyalist government had collapsed. A transitional council, led by Fleet Admiral Vextoran and representatives from across the hegemony, took power with a mandate to negotiate with the humans and prepare for the coming threat. Captain Sarah Chen descended to the surface of the Korvathi homeworld and met with the new council in the same chamber where Vextoran had once been denounced as a traitor.
"We know this is not easy," she said, addressing the assembled representatives of 7 species. "We know that accepting help from us requires you to abandon principles that have guided your civilization for millennia. We do not ask you to become like us. We only ask that you recognize the truth. None of us can survive alone." "How do we know we can trust you?" one of the representatives asked. "Your people destroyed one of our battle groups. You admit that you have been watching us for thousands of years. How do we know this is not some elaborate scheme to subjugate us?" "You don't. Trust must be earned, and we have not yet had the opportunity to earn yours. All we can offer is our word and our actions going forward. Judge us by what we do, not by what we say." "And if we refuse? If we choose to face the devouring on our own?" Captain Chen's expression grew somber. "Then you will be consumed, and we will mourn your loss. But we will not force you to accept our help. That is not our way."
Fleet Admiral Vextoran spoke then, his voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of experience. "I have stood where you stand now. I have asked the same questions, felt the same doubts, but I have also seen things that none of you have seen. I have walked the corridors of the Remembrance. I have looked upon the faces of billions who died so that humanity might learn the lessons we are only now beginning to understand. And I am convinced, completely, absolutely convinced, that our only hope lies in alliance." "What would such an alliance require?" "It would require us to change, to stop conquering and start cooperating, to build relationships based on mutual benefit rather than domination. It will not be easy. It will not be quick, but it is necessary." The debate continued for many more hours, but in the end, the vote was nearly unanimous. The hegemony would stand with humanity against the devouring. The alliance between the hegemony and humanity was only the beginning. Over the centuries that followed, the Remembrance and its sister ships made contact with dozens of other civilizations across the galaxy. Some, like the hegemony, had been observed for millennia and were now ready to join the alliance. Others were newly discovered, their development accelerated by the urgency of the approaching threat. Not all of them agreed to participate. Some refused to believe in the devouring, dismissing it as a fabrication designed to justify human interference in their affairs. Others believed, but chose to face the threat alone, convinced that their own technologies or ideologies would prove sufficient. Still others descended into internal chaos, unable to overcome the divisions within their own societies. The humans did not attempt to force compliance. They offered help to those who wanted it and mourned those who refused. It was a strange philosophy, one that many in the former hegemony struggled to understand, but over time its wisdom became apparent. An alliance built on force would have been fragile, prone to defection and betrayal when the crisis arrived. An alliance built on trust and mutual respect would endure. Fleet Admiral Vexteron did not live to see the final confrontation with the Devouring. He died peacefully at the age of 412 cycles, surrounded by friends and colleagues from a dozen different species. His final words were recorded and preserved in the Hall of Memory, alongside the billions of others who had given their lives for something greater than themselves. "Remember," he said, "remember who we were, and remember who we became. Remember that even the greatest empires can change. And remember that, in the end, what matters is not what we conquered, but what we built together." The Devouring came 10,000 years after first contact, almost exactly as humanity's projections had predicted. The entities were not ships in any conventional sense. They were not even physical in the way that matter was usually understood. They were absences, voids, gaps in the fabric of reality that consumed everything they touched. Stars vanished as they passed. Planets crumbled into nothingness. Entire civilizations, unprepared for what was coming, simply ceased to exist. But the Alliance was prepared. 10,000 years of cooperation had produced technologies that neither humanity nor any other single species could have developed alone. Ships that could navigate the spaces between dimensions. Weapons that could harm beings that were not quite real. Shields that could hold back the consuming void, if only for a little while. And most importantly, they had developed a plan. The Devouring cannot be destroyed, the human strategists explained at the final Council of War. They exist on a level of reality that is beyond our ability to affect permanently. But they can be redirected. They can be guided away from populated space, toward the voids between galaxies where there is nothing left to consume. How? By giving them something to follow, a beacon of sorts, a concentrated point of energy and matter that will draw their attention away from the rest of the galaxy. What kind of beacon? The human representative paused. And in that pause, the gathered allies understood what was being proposed. A sacrifice. A fleet of ships carrying volunteers from every allied species will serve as the lure. They will lead the Devouring away from the galaxy and into the void. They will not return. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the chamber understood what was being asked. Everyone understood that those who volunteered for this mission would be giving up everything, their lives, their futures, any hope of seeing their homes or families again. "I will go." The voice came from a young Korvathi officer, barely into her second century of life. She stood at attention, her 4 eyes fixed on the council with an intensity that reminded many of Fleet Admiral Vexteron himself. "I will go," she repeated. "I have studied the history of our alliance. I know what was sacrificed to bring us to this point. If another sacrifice is needed, I am willing to make it." Others followed, humans and Korvathi, then and Talari, representatives of every species that had joined the alliance over the millennia. They came forward one by one, adding their names to a list that would eventually number in the millions. The fleet was assembled in record time. Ships from every shipyard in the alliance, crewed by volunteers from every corner of the galaxy. At their head flew the Remembrance, its ancient hull now carrying the hopes of 1,000 civilizations.
Captain Sarah Chen had lived far beyond the natural lifespan of her species, preserved by technologies that had been developed over millennia of cooperation. She was old now, older than any human had ever been, but her eyes still held the same fierce determination that had guided her people through their darkest days.
Remember, she broadcast to the fleet as they prepared to depart. Remember why we fight. Remember who we are. Remember that every sacrifice means something, that every life lost is a life given in defense of something worth defending. We go now into the void, not because we want to die, but because we want others to live.
The fleet departed. The Alliance watched them go.
And then they waited. The waiting lasted for generations. Ships that had been young when the fleet departed grew old and were replaced. Officers who had commanded the defense died and were succeeded by their children and grandchildren. The devouring continued its approach, consuming star systems at the edge of Alliance space, but slowly, far more slowly than projected.
The fleet was working.
Somewhere out there, in the void between galaxies, millions of beings were leading the devouring away from everything they loved. Somewhere out there, the Remembrance was still flying, its ancient engines driving it ever onward into the infinite darkness.
And then, after so long that many had given up hope, a signal was received. It came from the edge of detectable space, faint and distorted by distance, but unmistakable. A single transmission, broadcast on frequencies that had not been used in thousands of years. Mission accomplished. The devouring has been led to the void. We estimate they will take approximately 1 million years to consume the space between galaxies before potentially returning. Use this time wisely. There was more. Names of those who had survived the journey. Final messages from those who had not. Technical data about the devouring that might prove useful in future encounters. And at the end, a single line that made those who received it weep. Remember us. Remember what we gave. And never forget that, in the end, the choice was ours to make.
1 million years is a long time.
In that time, the Alliance became something more than an alliance. It became a civilization, a culture, a shared identity that transcended species and homeworld and the petty divisions that had once seemed so important. The Hall of Memory expanded to include the faces of every being who had sacrificed themselves during the final crisis, joining the billions who had come before. And every year, on the anniversary of the fleet's departure, the people of the Alliance gathered to remember. They remembered the hegemony that had once conquered and subjugated, and the revolution that had changed it into something better. They remembered Fleet Admiral Vexterin, who had walked alone into the unknown and returned with a truth that changed everything. They remembered Captain Sarah Chen, who had carried the weight of human history on her shoulders and used it to save not just her own species, but all species. They remembered the young Korvathi officer who had been the first to volunteer, and the millions who had followed her into the void. And they remembered the lesson that had been so hard to learn, the truth that had cost so much blood and sacrifice to discover. That survival is not a competition. That strength comes from unity, not dominance. That even the greatest empires can change if they are willing to remember what they once were and imagine what they might become. The devouring would return someday. Everyone knew that. The void between galaxies was vast, but it was not infinite. And eventually, the consuming darkness would turn its attention back to the lights of inhabited space. But when that day came, the people of the Alliance would be ready.
Because they remembered.
Because they had never forgotten.
Because humanity and all the species that had joined them understood at last what it meant to be truly alive. Epilogue: The Watchers. In the void between galaxies, something stirred. The devouring had consumed the space it had been given, and now it was hungry again. It turned its vast, incomprehensible attention back toward the distant spiral of light that it had been led away from so long ago. But something else stirred as well. Deep in the void, in a place where no star had ever shone, a single ship drifted. Its hull was scarred and patched 1,000 times over. Its engines had long since failed, its crew long since passed. But something of its purpose remained, encoded in systems that were ancient beyond measure. The Remembrance detected the devouring's movement and activated one final protocol. A beacon flared to life, broadcasting on frequencies that would reach the Alliance in a matter of weeks rather than years. The message was simple, a warning and a reminder. They are coming again, but this time you have had 1,000,000 years to prepare. This time you are not alone. This time you will be ready. And then the beacon died, and the Remembrance went silent forever. But it had done its job. The Alliance received the message. The preparations began. And across a galaxy united by sacrifice and hope, billions of beings looked up at the stars and remembered those who had given everything so that others might live. The devouring was coming. But humanity and all who stood with them would be ready. Because that was what it meant to remember. Because that was what it meant to be human. And because, in the end, that was what the Alliance had learned from the strange, scarred ship that had appeared out of nowhere, destroyed a battle group alone, and changed the course of galactic history forever. The Empire had panicked when they encountered the unknown vessel. They had searched their records and found nothing. They had watched their battle group burn and wondered what terrible force they had awakened. But in the end, the thing they feared most, the humans, the ones who remembered, had not come to destroy them. They had come to save them. And that, more than anything else, was why the story of the Remembrance was still told, 1,000,000 years later, in every corner of a galaxy that had learned, at last, what it meant to stand together. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing in the universe is not a weapon or an enemy or a consuming void. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing is a chance to change. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find the courage to take it.